Today we're going to be taking a look at customizing databars with RadDataBars, part of the Telerik RAD controls and Silverlight control suites for .NET XAML development. In today's video, first we're going to take a look at implementing RadDataBar, RadStackDataBar, and the RadStack100 databar. Then we're going to go about displaying a data axis so we can provide a better external view of what data scale we're actually working with our databars. Last but certainly not least, we're going to see how we can modify the bar colors and some other useful settings for the RadDataBars that you can use to further customize them for your projects. Stepping into Visual Studio, I already used the Telerik Visual Studio extensions to create a brand new project, so we have the Telerik Windows Controls, Controls Data Visualization, and Windows Data Assemblies in our project, and I've also created some rows and columns for displaying our RadDataBar, StackDataBar, Data Axis, and Stack100 databar. So now we can step down through our XAML, make these controls up real quick, and then we can start on the customizations. So first up, we're going to do our RadDataBar. Telerik RadDataBar. X name is X DataBar. We need to put this in column number 1. And now I want to go ahead and set some values. So kind of sticking with what we were doing in the original getting started, we can set a minimum of -20, a maximum of 20, set our value somewhere in there to 10, and we can see our databar is going to display. Stepping down to our first Telerik Stack databar, Rad Stacked Databar. Name xStack databar. Row is 1. Grid.column is 1. Our minimum is going to be -20. Our maximum is going to be 20. And we're going to set our values from the code behind, so we don't have to worry about adding those just yet. Next up, I'm going to skip over the data axis and initiate the RadStack100 databar, just so we have all our databars in place. So Telerik RadStack100 databar. Again, X name is X stacked 100. Grid row will be, this should be 3. Grid.column equals 1. And we don't have to set the minimum or maximum on this because, as you remember, this is going to fill the entire width of what we have for the stack databar area. I'm going to do a quick save, step into code. I'm going to need to, once again, work with our loaded event. I'm going to conveniently just paste in some stuff we already had from the getting started video. So we have our RadDataBar item class that has a string for the tooltip and an int for the bar value. I go ahead and make a new list of these, add a few new items. I'm going to go ahead and modify these values just slightly. 3, 2, 4, and 5. And this is just because I want everything displayed nicely in our RadStack databar in this example. And we can see the item source is bar items for the stack databar and the xStack100 item source. So if I go ahead, save this. First, we want to go ahead and take our bar value and our tooltip value, put these into the stack databar for our paths. So value path is going to be bar value, and tooltip path is going to be, again, keeping the type safety, our tooltip item. Copy this over to our Stack100 databar. And we're ready to display some data. So now we can see, as expected, our RadDataBar is showing our value of 10, which we define in XAML. The Stack databar is showcasing the 4 values that we highlighted. We didn't set show tooltips on, so we're not actually getting our tooltips. And the Stack databar is using proportionally all the room it has available to showcase proportionally how the values compare to one another. So this is all pretty cool, but in looking at our databar and our Stack databar, it's kind of hard to tell what the scale is, what we're being measured against. So adding that rad data axis is really going to help us to define those. So we step back into our XAML, and we want to define a rad data axis. So we go to Telerik, rad data axis, x name equals x data axis. We just set our grid row is going to be 2. Grid column is going to be 1. And now, in looking at our RadDataBar and our Stack databar, we used a minimum of -20 and maximum of 20, so we're going to want to copy that. Minimum equals -20, maximum equals 20. And now once I close this up, we can see that our rad data axis is actually displaying. But the display is not optimal. It's kind of overlapping the edges of the grid column and the grid row, so we want to go and fix that. First thing we're going to do, add a vertical alignment of center, so that makes it a little easier to read. And then we want to add a little bit of margin. But the trick to this, I'm going to do margin 10.5, that should put it nicely positioned, is I want to copy this exact same margin over to our Stack databar as well as our RadDataBar. That way the scales do actually line up. Have that all displaying. And now if I do F5, we go ahead and run this, we're going to see that our DataBar and our stack DataBar are actually lining up to exactly where things are on this axis, which is pretty neat. But of course, now that this is all displaying, we can go ahead and customize this to really take advantage of these controls and how you can make them fit the needs of your applications. So starting at the top with our DataBar. Now there's a few settings that you can modify to change the look and feel of this. The first up being the bar height percent. So if we go to bar height percent, this is going to be its value going up to 1, so we'll say 0.5. And you can see our bar has shrunk a little bit. If we go to 0.8, it's now a much larger proportion of the available area. And if we get rid of it altogether, RadDataBar will use the best available option for how to display everything in the available area. 9 times out of 10, you can probably stick to not modifying the bar height percent, but perhaps, going back into this, if you need a really, really tiny bar for one reason or another, maybe you have a lot of data bars displaying, and you want this look and feel, you can go ahead and do it and add it to your project. We'll move back to 0.5 and leave it right there. Now, another thing I mentioned in the original Getting Started video is the origin value. So if we set origin value to, say, -5, where we actually define where the above or below the desired value is going to change, which means if I went and changed my value to, say, -2, this is still going to be displaying as blue. We're at -7, we're now below that origin value line, so then we'll go into the red territory for how the bar is going to display. In this case, we're going to go back to value 10, and the origin value will stick at 0, just to keep everything lining up with our data axis. Oh, and it's not going to be 10, it's going to be, or it's not going to be -10 rather, it's going to be 10. But of course, now I've shown you DataBar with that positive value is blue, the negative value is red. Of course, we can go ahead and change that. Going back into our XAML, we have both the negative value brush, and in this case, we're going to say it's a dark gray sounds in order. And if we want to set our regular positive value brush to a green. So now when we have this displayed, we can see our positive value is in the green, and if we go to negative value, we have a dark gray. So again, really, really quick and easy to customize, and it's really easy to make the DataBar fit the look and feel of your application. So now if we want to go down to the stack DataBar, we still have all these great things like the origin, the bar height percent, but now we don't really have the same concept of the negative and positive value as we have in the regular DataBar. Instead, we're stacking a bunch of values, which means we need a number of brushes, so a brush collection would be the most appropriate way to work with this. Go ahead and close this out a separate way, and I want to add one namespace real quick, which will be our DataBars. And the reason we have to do this is because if you look in the original rad chart that we have, that we've now kind of obsoleted for the rad chart view, there is a brush collection, but it's very different from what we use for the DataBars, so we don't want to have any kind of breaking changes, any quirks, any oddities, so this will, odds are, make it into the Telerik namespace, but for right now you have to use this DataBars reference. So we can scroll all the way down. We see Telerik Windows controls DataBars, Telerik Windows controls data visualization. It's exactly what we want, meaning with our DataBars namespace, scrolling back down, in our stack DataBar, we can say Telerik rad stack DataBar dot bar brushes, and this will be DataBars brush collection. Now, brush collection is simply an observable collection of brush items, meaning we can add a few different unique colors. In this case, I just so happen to have some nice ones predefined. Excellent blue and whitish collection, meaning our stack DataBar is going to use these brushes instead for the values, as opposed to those original ones that you saw kind of auto-defined. So if we go and run this right now, you can see all the changes to DataBar in the designer, but because I'm not using an MVVM setup or anything like this, everything's going in code behind, I need to run this, and we can now see our new brush collection in action in our stack DataBar. As you can see, here are my fantastic color choices. You can always see the designer in me in these choices I make for demos. When we have the 4 different values, they're going to our brush collection, so everything's working exactly as expected. Now next up, moving down through our XAML, is our data axis. Now you're probably thinking, there's not much I can really do with this because it's just displaying kind of a range of numbers. Well, that's true. There's not really entirely much you're going to want to do with the data axis. We actually have a pretty good standard style for how you want to define everything. But one thing you might want to distinguish is the ticks distance. This is going to say how far you want different items to display. So if I do ticks distance is 5, we can see that we now go from 0 to 4 to 8 to 12 to 16, 20. You have a lot more data displaying. If I go ahead and run this, again, we can see this in the browser. So now we're actually showing a lot more values, so you can better compare where values are falling. The neat thing is, I'm going to go and slide this browser down. This is actually very context aware. So as I move way down, we're going back down to the number of ticks that we actually can display and visibly display the labels, which makes it really handy. So as your users resize your application, or if you have a dynamically sized window, the axis labels aren't going to be overlapping, they're not going to be displaying weirdly, they're really going to go with what you're doing in your application. And the last thing I want to show you is a customization to the stacked 100 DataBar, because again, this control is doing pretty much what you would expect for a stacked 100 bar rather, in that it uses all the available area to do a nice comparative measure between everything. Add that same margin in because it looks kind of nice on the stacked DataBar itself. And the modification I want to do here is actually the same thing that we're seeing with our RAD stacked DataBar. So I can copy and paste that very same code, and the only thing I want to change is the fact that this is a stacked 100 DataBar now, not a stacked DataBar. But if I go and run this one more time, since we're using the same data set, you know we're going to see that same kind of proportional view of all our data, except now we're using the same fantastic color scheme in our stacked DataBar as well as our stacked 100 DataBar. So you've seen just how easy it is to customize the RadDataBars, and I hope you stay tuned for more videos in this collection and how you can quickly and easily modify them to fit the look and feel and needs of your application. Stay tuned for more.